My name is Jonathan Parks, and welcome to Jonathan's Nature Crafts. Now, in the previous video, there were some certain little steps I showed as far as how I kind of did some things with the detail sander. But it turns out that, like I said before, there's a certain part that is better to sand by hand than with power. We're going to move this thing down a little bit to try to demonstrate. But you know, you see how here among the edges, there are little curves. Sometimes, just sometimes, that can be the kind of thing where sanding with power can take off a little too much wood. So it's better to kind of take it by hand along these edges. And so we will do, I say, this is just kind of little areas of work we have to apply to our dadgum lives. And so I tell y'all that little hippos just come interesting little ways. There was a certain story one time about a man named, his name was Maurice something or another. Don't remember his last name, but there was a story as to he lived in South Africa and tried to keep a hippo as a pet and named it Humphrey. He adopted it from the time it was just a little baby out of a wildlife rescue center. It was captive born, captive bred, but all these other things happened in the story. I mean, built a lagoon in his backyard, had a bucket full of apples he fed to that big hippo, and I say, he kind of kept another couple little exotic animals as well. Or I know one of them was a rhino, and the other one, I think it was a giraffe. And, you know, so many people warned him for so long about keeping a hippo as a pet. It was considered Africa's most dangerous animal. Probably more dangerous than a lion or a honey badger or anything else along those premises. And when it all just comes down to the very root of it all, it's like he called it his son. And like anytime that it would get aggressive or something, he could always take an apple and lure it away. But it kind of happened that the lagoon and the apple bucket became the hippo's territory. So it kind of also happened that there was a time when the hippo started attacking the neighbor's cattle, and they tried to tell him to move it away. He wouldn't. The hippo even chased a man and his son up a tree. They had to get up the tree to escape from it. But he was able to take an apple and lure it away to get it to leave them alone. We're going to go on to the next hippo here. But what ended up happening after that was that it should have been a warning to him as to what would happen next, but he didn't take heed. One day the hippo was in its lagoon in the yard. He took an apple from the bucket and started to eat it. And he came up to the lagoon. Some of these people who were around him, they recognized signs from the hippo that he didn't. But they could start to see how the hippo was kind of giving some cues with its eyes and its ears, which is usually a sign from them that you're invading their territory. And as he approached the lagoon, the hippo came out one day and mauled him to death. So they always just warn you these things about how all these creatures, you know, they can be captive tamed, captive bred, captive born, and they still have their very wild nature and their very wild instincts. It's just best to keep them in zoos or wherever so that they be safe from everybody else. As you see, I want to tell you all that, you know, this little blank, after all these pieces were cut, I lost track of them for a while. A flood came through this basement and wet all these pieces. So there's probably just some little mildew or something in the wood, and we're going to get that out as well. So bear with me on that. You can probably see how when it comes down to something like that, there's kind of like little blue spots in the wood. It's hard to see them on camera, but that's what they are, dadgummit. Just little blue things, little spots that kind of shine and make a little nonsense to us all. The heck with all this business, I say. All this stuff. I tell you all that we just got neat little critters here, and I say that there's one thing I can tell you all about hippos, that from some of what I've seen, they only have two enemies. That is lions and man. We know that lions prey on hippos in a way. They jump on their backs and claw and claw and claw at their skin till they go into the water, and when the lion is done clawing at it, finally bleeds to death and the lion preys on it. But I've seen some things happen where, you know, where a lion messes with the wrong hippo, thinking it's going to have it for its snack or for its meal, and then next thing you know, the hippo takes its jaws and smashes the lion's muzzle, smashes its snout. I tell y'all, for some little trick like this, so much to say. I know one time in my life, you know, there's been times I've seen little things show up across Facebook and YouTube and all the things people have advertised, you know. There was apparently some old commercial about a happy hippo in a happy home that used to show up in Canada years ago. Never seen it because I've always been in the United States, but did kind of see it probably show up somewhere. And when it came down to the very last word or two, you know, there's been so much to be said along these words and these lines. Good little mask can measure up, and I say there's been little times, you know, when little hippo carcasses have remained in the swamp, and sometimes the crocodiles would just eat what was left of it. And knowing they're meat eaters too, you know, there's just lots of things that alligators and crocodiles eat by dragging them underwater and drowning them. And there's all these creatures with all these strong jaws that have the power to kill and eat things. You know, I tell y'all people, I used to read as a kid that though a hippo has very sharp teeth, it only eats grass. It's only a vegetarian. But nonetheless, I used to hear that maybe even those plants that they eat. They just might be very thick plants. They might be very tough plants. They might be the kind of plants that require some strong jaws and some sharp teeth to tackle. And there's been times I've seen things on little zoo programs as a kid where sometimes, just sometimes, it would almost be like with a little hippo's jaw. You know, hippo would be so tame that it could open its mouth up wide and the zookeeper could pet it on the tongue. So, I tell y'all, sometimes creatures can have little differences about them. And, you know, there's some of these things that as a kid used to not always understand how plant-eating animals could be so fierce. But there were so many creatures as a kid about which I used to ask my mom the question, is this creature fierce? Is this creature fierce? One of them I was probably asking her about was hippos. That time she didn't think hippos could be too fierce. So she kind of said that under a certain condition they could be, maybe. And I don't know what all it was, but when I asked her as a kid if rhinoceroses were fierce, she said yes. Of course, there are certain things that rhinos are more known for. They've been known to be aggressive when threatened by any creature, including a human. And hippos are not as known for it as rhinos are. But there's just lots of creatures out there on the African savanna that can just be aggressive when threatened, including a Cape buffalo. You know, rhinos have their territory and Cape buffaloes have theirs. And when one invades the territory of the other gets aggressive. And once I saw a video of a little fight between a rhino and a Cape buffalo when that happened. And, you know, we know sometimes plant-eating animals get a little aggressive, and, you know, of all things, I say, you probably also come to realize that rhinos can pretty much use their horns to chase lions off, or that's on their little nose. But you think about the horns that are on a Cape buffalo's head. When Cape buffalo are in groups, they can kind of protect themselves against a lion, but sometimes it can be hard for one to protect himself against the whole pride. But sometimes when Cape buffaloes have to defend themselves, a lion will end up with a horn stuck in its body. It came right off the Cape buffalo's head, you know. So I say, with all we're doing here now, we've got a lot of sanding we've just done with the 40 grit, and I say that this little hippo surprise is going to go a longer way in the future. So I just wanted to say to those of you who came on today, thank you all very much. Hope you have a blessed day. Take care. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to this channel. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.